So here is what nobody is telling you, and I want to be very clear about this. What is happening right now in the Middle East is not just a war between America and Iran. This is the beginning of something much, much larger. And I say this not to scare you. I say this because if you actually look at the map, if you actually read the documents that are publicly available, the picture becomes very clear. So let me walk you through this. The first thing you need to understand is that America has a grand plan. And this plan is not a secret. It is sitting right on the Department of Defense website. Anyone can go there right now and download it. And what it says is very simple. America needs to do two things to stay the most powerful country in the world. First, build a strong fortress in the Western Hemisphere, meaning the Americas. Second, create division and confusion everywhere else. And when you understand that, everything Trump is doing starts to make perfect sense. Look at the countries he has named. Venezuela, Cuba, Greenland, Canada, Mexico, Colombia. Every single one of them is in the Western Hemisphere. That is not a coincidence. That is the plan being carried out in real time right in front of us. Now the second part, divide and rule. Picture this. NATO fights Russia in Ukraine. China fights Japan and South Korea in East Asia. Iran fights the Gulf states and Israel in the Middle East. What does America do? America sells weapons to everyone. America gives money to everyone. America becomes the one that everyone depends on. This is exactly what happened in World War II, and this is what they are trying to recreate right now. The $40 trillion in American debt, it disappears. It gets swallowed up by the chaos of a world at war. So people say Trump is an idiot. But if you look at the map, the way America wants this map to play out, it is actually a very clear and thought out strategy. Now, the war against Iran. Let me explain how this is unfolding because most people do not understand the phases. Phase 1 started earlier this year. The goal was to cut off the head, strike Tehran, strike the military bases, force Iran to give up. That is what the Americans call shock and awe. But that is not what happened. Instead of surrendering, Iran attacked American bases all across the Gulf. They shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which is one of the most important waterways in the world for oil shipments. They rallied their people together. Rather than falling apart, Iran pushed back even harder. So now we move to phase 2 and then phase 3, where the strategy changes completely. No more trying to cut off the head. Now it is about a blockade. Cut off Iran's oil, cut off their money. And Iran has two ways of making money right now. First is selling oil, 90% of which goes to China. Second is the fees they are collecting at the Strait of Hormuz, reportedly $2 million per ship that passes through. So America needs to shut down both of those. A naval blockade, meaning warships surrounding Iran's waters, does exactly that. But that is only strategy 1. Strategy 2 is creating chaos from the inside. And if you look at the ethnic map of Iran, meaning a map that shows which groups of people live where, the Persian population sits in the center of the country. But on the edges, you have ethnic minority groups, the Baloch people in the southeast, near Pakistan, and the Kurds in the northwest. Both groups have historically pushed back against the government in Tehran. So what does the US military do? It sets up forward operating bases, meaning small military outposts in these regions. It arms and trains these ethnic fighters. It turns them into pressure points. And when the Iranian military has to move out in the open to stop these rebellions, American air power destroys them. Because right now, the Iranian military is hiding inside mountains, and you cannot hit where you cannot see. Strategy 3 is to choke Tehran itself. 10 million people live there. Deny them water, electricity, and food. Attack power plants. Attack reservoirs. Attack the railways bringing supplies into the capital. When 10 million people have nothing, they rise up against their own government and demand a settlement. But here is where it gets very complicated. Iran is not a simple political system. It is a theocracy, meaning a country ruled by religious leaders. You have the mullahs who control foreign policy and religious law. Then you have a separate government structure that handles everyday life. And then you have two separate militaries. the regular army, and the IRGC, which stands for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The IRGC is loyal only to the mullahs. The IRGC sees this war as a holy mission. They are not interested in a ceasefire. They want to fight until America is pushed out of the Middle East entirely. The political leadership in Tehran sees it completely differently. They want a settlement as fast as possible. So these ceasefire talks, they are all for show. Because even if America gave Iran everything it wanted at the negotiating table, the IRGC would not stop fighting. And the IRGC practices something called the mosaic strategy. 31 provinces, 31 separate command structures, each one local, each one able to operate on its own. Why? Because the Americans have the most advanced surveillance technology ever built. They can find your leaders and kill them. The only way around that is to spread leadership everywhere. So it is both everywhere and nowhere at once. This is a fight designed to never end. Now let me give you the chessboard, because this is how I think about what is coming. The United States is the king. Its political system is democracy, which is lively, creative, and flexible. But its deadly weakness is division. The way you defeat America is not to attack it from the outside. You defeat it by pushing it into a civil war. You push Democrats and Republicans so far apart that the powerful people at the top take up arms against each other. That is the end game for America's enemies. Russia is the autocracy, meaning one strong leader makes all the decisions, decisive, determined, and always thinking long term. But if that one leader falls, the entire system collapses. Russia's grand plan is what they call the Third Rome. Russia sees itself as the true heir to the Roman Empire, the leader of the Christian world, fighting against American materialism and what they call moral decay. Their philosopher Alexander Dugin wrote in 1997 that Russia must build alliances across the massive landmass of Eurasia to cancel out American sea power. Their weapons are land, the Orthodox Christian religion, and artillery. And their soldiers are perhaps the most willing to die for what they believe in of any army in the world today. Israel operates as both a democracy and a theocracy. Brilliant, but deeply divided from the inside. Tel Aviv and Jerusalem fundamentally disagree on what Israel should be. But their grand strategy is what is called the Greater Israel Project, land stretching from the Nile River to the Euphrates River. That is what their scripture promises. Their tools are the Mossad, which is one of the most effective intelligence agencies in the world, the Jewish diaspora, meaning Jewish communities spread across the globe with business connections everywhere, and the Bible itself. Because there are tens of millions of Christian Zionists in America who believe that supporting Israel is literally the will of God. Iran is a theocracy. Its people are not afraid to die, but its weakness is that most everyday Iranians just want a normal, decent life. If the IRGC makes that impossible, the people will turn against their own government. Iran's tools are its proxy groups, meaning forces it supports in other countries, including Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. It uses asymmetric warfare, which means using low-cost tactics like drones and missiles to cause damage far greater than what they cost to build. And its geography is a weapon too. Iran is a natural fortress. You simply cannot invade it easily. Now let us talk about China, because most analysts are making a big mistake. They are treating China as a bystander just watching from the sidelines. China is not a bystander. China is one of the most important, yet least openly visible players in what is happening in the world right now. Its relationship with Iran, especially when it comes to energy, is something that serious analysts pay very close attention to. A large portion of Iran's oil exports is believed to flow to Chinese markets. From this perspective, any disruption in Iranian oil supply could be a real challenge to China's energy security, especially at a time when it is managing industrial demand, economic stability, and long-term energy planning. However, China's way of handling these kinds of situations is typically not loud or sudden. Instead, Beijing has historically preferred long-term planning, building backup options into its supply chains, and spreading its energy sourcing across many different regions. Within this thinking, Iran is best understood as one of several important pieces in China's larger Belt and Road strategy, which is its massive global infrastructure investment program, rather than as a single point that could cause everything to collapse. While Iran's location does make it strategically important for land routes connecting Asia to parts of Europe and the Middle East, China's global infrastructure goals also include sea routes and alternative land pathways that reduce dependence on any single country. Because of this, interpretations that frame China's role as immediately decisive or openly aggressive tend to oversimplify a much more layered reality. Chinese foreign policy has generally relied on economic tools, diplomatic positioning, and gradual influence rather than direct military moves. Financial involvement, infrastructure investment, and trade agreements are the more typical tools through which Beijing manages its regional relationships, including with Iran, rather than open strategic escalation. Pakistan is often brought into this broader conversation because of its geographic location, its internal security challenges, and its relationships with both China and the United States. It sits in a uniquely complicated position, particularly when it comes to border security concerns, armed group activity in nearby regions, and its long-standing economic and military partnerships. In theoretical scenarios involving instability along Iran's eastern borders, Pakistan's strategic decisions would likely be shaped by a mix of its own domestic security priorities, regional diplomacy, and its existing commitments to major global powers. Nevertheless, predictions of sudden alignment shifts or immediate escalation into a broader conflict involving multiple nuclear-armed countries tend to ignore the real limits and risk avoidance behavior that typically guide how governments make decisions in such situations. Governments in these environments usually respond through careful and measured actions, back-channel diplomacy, and containment strategies, especially when multiple paths toward escalation exist. When looking at Russia and China together, analysts often focus on their overlapping infrastructure interests, trade routes, and regional influence zones. Russia's engagement with Iran is generally seen through the lens of regional security cooperation, energy coordination, and geopolitical balancing, especially in relation to Western influence in Eastern Europe and the Middle East. China's engagement, meanwhile, is primarily economic and focused on building infrastructure. While there are areas where their interests overlap, how far these relationships would automatically translate into coordinated military action is widely debated and far from a settled conclusion. More broadly, high-intensity conflict scenarios involving multiple great powers are usually held back by the logic of deterrence, meaning the fear of what the other side could do back, economic interdependence, and the catastrophic risks that come with direct confrontation between nuclear-armed states. Historically, even during periods of severe tension, global powers have tended to rely on indirect competition, proxy influence, and diplomatic signals rather than full-scale direct engagement. Domestically, discussions about surveillance systems, digital currency, and expanded government power often come up in the context of national security, technological development, and administrative efficiency. These trends are not the same in every country, and they develop through laws, economic pressures, and whether the public accepts or pushes back against them. While technological tools of governance are expanding globally in different forms, how they are put into practice varies significantly depending on the political system and the institutions in place. Finally, regional conflicts in the Middle East, including long-standing disputes involving Israel and neighboring states, remain highly complex and are shaped by historical, political, and security factors that cannot be reduced to one single path or outcome. What happens in these environments is typically determined by shifting alliances, outside mediation efforts, military limitations, and internal political developments, rather than by any predetermined strategic destination. Overall, rather than one straight road toward global confrontation, the international system is better understood as a set of competing pressures. Economic interdependence, security fears, regional rivalries, and diplomatic constraints are all constantly pushing and pulling against each other. These forces can increase tensions in some moments, while at the very same time creating reasons to step back from the edge in others. If this gave you a clear picture of what is really happening in the world, share it with someone who needs to see it. And if you want to go even deeper on the strategies and forces shaping our future, make sure you are following along, because this conversation is only getting started.